So here's the latest version of the printer app. I haven't really made a lot of changes to it, at least to the user interface. I've spent a lot of time thinking about how the database is going to work and some higher level stuff, and I had to rework some of the state management stuff the further along I got with what I wanted to do. So not a lot has changed in the actual user interface, but a lot did change in the back end part of it. So one thing that's new is this button here, add 32 Lustre 8x10s remaining prints. The goal, like I said earlier in one of the other videos, is you don't really want to use these buttons down here. These are really just as a backstop. If you need them in an emergency to do something, you really want to just print the order. So all this order has in it is 8x10s, and nothing's been printed yet. So it knows that there's 32 prints, 32 8x10 prints to make now, and I can click this button and it'll add them all into the cart, and I can just tell it to print to whatever machine I want. This is new down here. I can disable a printer. That's pretty handy if you have one machine off or something and you keep forgetting. Sometimes we're just on autopilot sending stuff to different machines, and it's nice to be able to turn them off. But this is really much more handy. So I'm going to clear the card here, get back to where we were. And now if I manually put a couple of these in here and print them, right now it says add 32. As soon as I print these two, it's going to know those two have been printed, and this is going to go down to 30. And there it is, add 30. So it knows which ones need to be printed. And I don't have a good order to show this on, but it also knows the quantity needed on each one. So if these were 5 each instead of 1 each, it would know that it needs to do 5. And if I printed one of these and it needed 5, I'm pretty sure it would know it needs 4 more. I only just now finished adding this in there, and there's a lot I need to do to it. It's not going to be this giant button. It's going to have a little label on it to tell you more information about how many have been printed and how many are needed. And then I'm also going to limit how many it puts in the cart. So if you go back to this one that has 1,464 prints, you can see it here. You can tell that I've already printed some of them because it only wants to print 1,449. But I don't want to click this and print 1,400 into the cart. I want to do them in bunches that our packaging can handle. So that's somewhere around 250 or 270. I'll eventually make it so this button will pick the next 250 or 270 that need to be printed, and then it'll add those to the cart, and then it'll tell you how many are remaining, and you can click the button again and it'll add those to the cart after you print them. That way you can sort of manage how much stuff you're sending to a printer. You could also divide up a large order between different machines if you had more than one machine. Just makes life a little bit easier. Another thing we did, I don't think this was in the last one, is now the folder icon can be orange. That means that something has happened to the order. This one still needs one print. It's basically the icon is going to be orange if there's any history. So you can see I've been playing with this one and printing it, and I've just marked all of them as redos so that I could do this and test this. The orange part doesn't mean anything other than something's happened. It might still need to be printed, or you might have printed half of it or something. It's just a little flag to know. Basically, this one here hasn't been touched at all. The green icon means I've set it to archive, and that it hopefully, once I get the archive ability set up, then it'll copy these or move this folder into an archive folder so it won't be in your list of orders to do. That might be about it that's different in the user interface. The button here to disable a printer, this icon, that was actually pretty difficult to do. In the code, when I'm using the AI to help me write stuff, it likes to do stuff in like a high level way. It's actually pretty clever, but it doesn't realize that my case is fairly simple. So it's creating a bunch of contexts, and then it has hooks for different things. So we had to use order history hook, and that actually made it pretty hard to get the information I needed in different places. Even though it's supposed to make it easier by having the hook, what's really easier is in this index file, the use history hook was basically just this. And it's so much easier to have this in the home page, which I can then pass I can pass this function, refresh history, or toggle reprint. Toggle reprint is the thing that allows you to say this is a redo or not a redo. It's so much easier to just pass that into the components where you want them. So I end up wanting some stuff in the order detail section, which is the part at the top. And then the images table, this is going to be a different view of the images. Right now I'm just working on the images grid. It's just a lot easier to pass these history management functions into that grid, and then if I want them someplace else, I can pass them in there as well. It just makes it so much easier. I think the problem with this sorted files, which is an array of all the products, all the images, and the product data that goes with them, that affects history. And if you don't manage that all up in this level and then pass what you want into the other components, it really doesn't work very well. So the other big thing we did is that this app is using SQLite, or actually better SQLite 3. Which is a very simple database that you can bundle in with an application. So a lot of mobile phone apps run SQLite. SQLite's actually the most popular database in the world, I believe, just because it's on a lot of devices. But it's not meant to allow multiple connections. So on a device app where you're the only one connecting it to on your device, it works great. This printer app, if you're only going to ever have one printer app running at your shop, it would be great also. But at my shop, I kind of would like to have multiple versions of the printer app running on different computers, sort of as a customer service. You could pull up an order. Once I have the archive thing ready to go, there's going to be a button down here that'll say find an order, and it'll go look in the archive and pull it back up in here, and you can see what the order was, and you can see when it was printed and what machine it was printed on, just to help you track down stuff. So that would be handy as a customer service thing. And the SQLite database would actually handle reading stuff between different computers, but it wouldn't handle writing stuff. And I also want to be able to have two different people sending prints to two different machines. And SQLite wasn't really going to work very well out of the box for that. So I spent a lot of time researching what my options were. And for a while there, I was going to change the database to be Postgres instead of SQLite. But then you'd have to install Postgres, and that's just sort of a challenge probably for some people. Probably not a big deal for me, but still more challenging than it should be. So I've had numerous discussions with the AI, both ChatGPT and in here. If you look at my history, there should be a couple of different conversations in here about data structure and how to work with a database. I also had a long history with the ChatGPT asking it stuff. It's really great for understanding high-level stuff like that. And one of the options it gave me was to run SQLite on one instance of the printer app and say it's a server, and then use an API. And then other versions of the printer app on different computers could connect to this one through the API and send history updates. So far, that's all I'm keeping track of in the database is the history. So these things here, that's the only thing that I have in the database right now. So it's really simple. So we did that, and now up here in the main section, I have a server.js file, which I'm just using Express. And I just have a couple of different routes. Here's how to get order history for a folder. I believe this one is updating order history. And this one's creating a new order history. That's all of that's really going on. And I was a little afraid this would be slow, but it's really not. It actually has worked great. And so now under settings, I have a server configuration down here. By default, it'll say it's a server. I need to change the text on this, say server or standalone. You don't have to. Basically, when it's set up as server, it's a standalone system. You can accept connections from other computers. And then the other computer, the printer app, would be set to be a client. And then you connect to the server by the IP address, and then you can test the connection. It's automatically set to a certain port, so there might be some firewall issues with that, but I don't think port 3213 is used for anything. I probably need to double check that in the long run. Maybe there'll be a way to set the port, but it's certainly not going to be a problem for me. You can test the connection. If the connection is successful, then you can save the server settings. This is just connecting to itself, so of course it worked. If I type in something that's not an IP address and test it, it'll give it a chance, and then after a couple seconds it'll say it was unsuccessful, and then it won't let you save the settings. So I'll go back to server, click save. So I'm a little excited about that now, so even if I go to one of these orders, it needs 470. I'll add 470 of them to the cart, and I'll tell it to print, and as soon as it's done printing, it's moving a bunch of files around right now while it's saying it's printing, and then it's also making a text file with a bunch of data for each one of these images with the size and the surface setting for the paper magazine on the Ritsu. This is making an Ritsu text file. But once it's done, the last thing it does is update all the history, and they'll all immediately update. Let's see, I think there's some logging. If I go over here, it'll tell you what it's doing, right? It's zooming through them right now. And again, I told it to print 470. That's more than I would ever want to send to the printer at one time. So this does take a little while. It's a little longer than what I would expect it to take. But I also don't send 470 files to the printer all at once very often. I also think part of the reason why it might be taking a while is that it's logging all this, although this isn't really logging much. There was a bunch of logging. That was the history getting done. Ruh-roh. Oh, that's interesting. And now it says add 329. What did it do? Ruh-roh. I haven't actually tested this very much. Boy, it kind of looks like it only did some of them. I bet you the history didn't update on all of them. Interesting.